Hello, everyone, and welcome to the season finale of Gooey's Dungeon Dive, the Majora's Mask season, of course. And I'm joined, as always, by my pal, Corey Richmond. How's it going, Corey?
Howdy. It's going good. I'm excited to talk some
right.
Majora's Mask.
Yeah. Let's. Well, you know what? Before we do it, why don't you tell everyone about your podcast? What have you been up to lately on the Player Power Podcast?
Absolutely. Player Power Podcast, you can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. Our last episode just came out, I think, last week. We took a look at some of the most iconic video game swords, and we rated them out of 10 and made a list that way.
That is sick.
Yeah.
You know what? I don't know why I've been meaning to listen to that one, because I always like when you guys do those kind of shows. So yeah. I apologize, but I'm going to listen to that soon.
That's all right.
It's a really good show. I've been on it, of course.
Yeah, you were on the episode before that.
Everyone likes our ranking antics, and it carries over to here. And, you know, hopefully by the time this is out, we'll have another thing going too.
Yeah.
Little tease.
Juicy little secret.
Maybe it won't be a tease by the time. But.
Yeah.
Okay. So whatever, we're talking Majora's Mask. The dungeons in particular, but I guess we can kind of talk about the game as a whole. It's an interesting game to talk about the dungeons, I guess you could say, because there's only really 4, and then it's really a game of there's like even beyond dungeons. It's just all the side content and everything, but there are a lot of like mini side areas even beyond the mini dungeons we talked about in the series that like have that sort of element. And I don't know, I just thought that was an interesting thing about this game, that there's just so many like just like tiny challenges spread throughout it.
Yeah, there's a lot of little pockets with like level design, dungeon like stuff, like even like the sculptural houses and stuff. We didn't cover those, but we didn't cover those,
similar. Yeah. And I mean, some of those are more substantial than other things, but I don't know. Yeah, it becomes hard to. It really gets into what is a dungeon. That like this was the first game where that really was like crossing my mind a lot, you know, because it's like there's even just a lot of little tiny areas where I think we kind of see like maybe one of the prototype areas of like those sort of like take them all on challenge type things, because in this game there's like that hidden temple or whatever it's called, that little secret shrine I think is what it's called, where you like face off against some of the mini bosses you faced throughout the game. I don't know, there's just like a lot of like little areas like that, but on the whole there's only these 4 major dungeons, and you know that obviously the reason why is because of how little of time they had to develop this game. Yeah. Though I mean at the same time there's so much going on in this game, so yeah, I don't know what to make of that, but the number of dungeons in Majora's Mask, like that's something I've always kind of like naturally, when I think of Majora's Mask dungeons, I kind of like look down on it, because I'm like, oh, there's only 4 dungeons. But going into this, I was actually very surprised by, my reaction to a lot of these dungeons, and even a lot of the mini dungeons too. Yeah, I guess I was trying to like hold off on like talking about them because I don't want to like spoil anything, but we've already kind of ranked all the major dungeons, so we can kind of talk about the major dungeons as a whole. And I've always been a fan of these, but I think there's like, I don't know, I think with the dungeons, I feel like there is a lot of like effort put into them in this game, at least to try to like give them a really unique hook, And so while there aren't many, like to me, there's some of the more, even if some aren't executed as well as they could be, which I think most of them are, but like, even with some of their flaws, I feel like you can't say they didn't try, you know what I mean? Like, that they weren't going. They were definitely going for something with a lot of these dungeons.
Yeah, they were definitely taking a swing with each one.
I mean, I see with I mean, you gave most of them pretty solid rankings even too. So, I mean, we both kind of agree with Woodfall. We have that kind of low, but yeah, for me, that was kind of the theme with a lot of the major dungeons was I really liked what they came up with. Like I felt like with Ocarina of Time, we got some great dungeons that showed like here's something you can only do in like 3D pretty much. Like something like the Water Temple, or even, you know, with their intro dungeon in like the Deku Tree, it's like here's stuff that it only really lends itself to 3D, at least in the form they present it. But then it still had a lot of stuff that I felt like was in there because it's like, well, this was in A Link to the Past or Link's Awakening, and it's a Zelda thing, and so we got to have it here. And I felt like with this, with a lot of the Majora's Mask dungeons, I think they really were going for like taking full advantage of like what you can do in 3D, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with, I feel like the dungeons in this game kind of just gradually keep getting better and better. And I you know,
okay, yeah,
like you said, we both kind of put Woodfall relatively low, at least compared to the other three main dungeons. But I feel like really those concepts, they just elaborate on them more and more and make them such a memorable central mechanic.
So like, yeah, so like it's not just like Link's Awakening, I think is a great example of like some awesome 2D dungeons, but like it's typically like here's a couple different, like it'll have a like all the keys and the locked doors that kind of gate you, and then it'll have like, you know, the boss key or the nightmare key or whatever, and then like some stuff that's item related. And that's great. That's an awesome formula. Like those are some of my favorite dungeons, but like I really liked the mix of things in Majora's Mask on how you would have like the mechanisms, obviously, of how the dungeon worked would be an awesome gate. You know, most of them could get by with only having like a key.
Yeah.
You know, it's like just to, like the keys I felt like in this were like a more complementary than they were like the dungeons based around them, you know?
Well, so even compared to like Ocarina of Time, that has plenty where you are just being gated by, this is a locked door, I don't have a key for it yet, I need to find a key. Whereas in this, it's really much more like you got to figure out how to utilize this dungeon's mechanic or your abilities that you have to figure out the way forward.
Yeah, it'll be like, especially because you can travel to so much of the dungeon almost initially, you know, and it's really, you just have to like figure out how it works. That's why I had Great Bay honestly so high, is because like right away in the first two rooms of the dungeon like show you like, here it is, this is what the dungeon is. Yep. You know, like and they give you the solution actually, you know.
Yep.
They're like, oh, look at all this mechanism, and you walk into the next room and they're like, oh, this is water wheel. What? That's turning the, you know, and then it's like, okay, now like you got to figure out how to turn it around, or like you have to kind of put two and two together.
Yeah.
And that was kind of exemplary, but they all kind of had that a little bit for the most part.
Yeah, I don't know if you watch or have ever heard of Boss Keys. It's like a...
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so these, I don't remember which game Mark Brown was talking about, but he refers to some dungeons as like follow the path dungeons and find the path dungeons. And like, whereas a lot of specifically 2D dungeons that we've covered thus far, but even quite a few in Ocarina of Time, they're kind of like follow the path, where it's like, you know what the way forward is. You just need to, get rid of roadblock X, Y, and Z to continue following that path. But I feel like these dungeons are much more like, this space is open to you, and a lot of them, the critical path to get forward and beat the dungeon is relatively linear. Like there's not a ton of, there's definitely some, but there's not a ton of variation, but it's really just a matter of you need to find the way forward because it's not spelled out for you.
Yeah, totally. That's 100% right. And that's what made some of these, like something like Great Bay, an interesting distinction compared to like the Water Temple, which sort of had this like dungeon, like changing the status of the dungeon. And that you were like, I mean, you're kind of doing the same thing in both, where it's like you're changing the dungeon to be able to reach new areas. But I really think, I don't know, I just think that it was like the fact that something like Snowhead or Great Bay actually don't require as much of just like, okay, put the water level here or put this here. And it's more of just like, you just have to figure out like how it works, and then you're good, as opposed to like the Water Temple, which is obviously so great, but like it's a little bit more like, okay, the water level's here, now let's explore all the paths.
It's a lot more trial and error, whereas with something like Great Bay, it's a like you said, it's a lot more like, once you wrap your head around the central mechanic, it's not a matter of, okay, so let me go and try a bunch of things. Once you reverse the water, you're like, oh, now I can access those other passages that were already teased to me before,
Right. And yeah, I don't want to totally discredit the Water Temple, because it does have some great stuff like, oh, how do I got to come back to get to this cracked wall to bomb it. It does have some of that, but it's just, it's so, all the offshoots and stuff kind of, I mean, it's intentional, but it throws you for a loop a little bit. Whereas like, I love that it's like, the puzzle of some of these is just like, you just got to stare at it for a while and be like, oh, okay.
And
or try to brute force it, I guess.
I did still put the Water Temple like one spot above Great Bay, but they're both, I feel like they're both really great examples of, because they have similar mechanics, but it's really the way that each dungeon approaches it is totally different.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly. It feels like a follow-up to it in a way.
Yeah.
In a similar way, I guess the Water Temple was like kind of building upon like the whole Swamp Palace idea of just having water at all, Then it was like, let's totally twist that and make it even more compelling and complex. And then this was like, okay, well, what do you do from there,
Yeah.
I felt like Ocarina of Time, it's such a great game, but I feel like some of it is, like I said, it's like can this even work in 3D, or how do we make it work in 3D? And now here, I feel like they're a little bit more confident, I guess.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe I've read various things where like maybe these aren't their proudest dungeons, but I think they should be proud of them.
Yeah. Definitely a few of them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's Woodfall being low. It's kind of weird, because it's like there's not much of a like, there's progression in that, like, you were saying they get better and better, but like there's not really like, here's the intro to the game. You spent so long by the time you get to Woodfall popping around as the Deku scrub.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know, Woodfall Temple feels like a second dungeon to me, like, it's weird in that regard, and then there's all these little mini areas again, that kind of, I don't know, there's not your typical progression, I guess.
By the time you get to Woodfall, you've already experienced so much gameplay and so much different kinds of gameplay that it's like, for that to be the intro dungeon, and it's pretty simple. There aren't really a ton of memorable puzzles. There's nothing brain busting. There's nothing super challenging. It's just kind of lukewarm, especially for what would be considered a lot of build up if you look at it that way.
Yeah, for sure. It's just not a conventional game, obviously. Like, it's almost about something else than the dungeons, but obviously you got to have the dungeons there, and they're awesome anyway, so that's fine. I mean, what'd you make of like all the little mini dungeon areas? Like not just the ones we sort of mentioned, but the ones we like ranked and stuff, like Pirate's Fortress, Iconic Castle, stuff like that.
I don't know, because again, like I said, going into this, and I actually, listening back to our the last season finale, or the Ocarina of Time one, when we were saying like, are you excited for Majora's Mask? I was kind of like, not so much, maybe, we'll see. But honestly, every time, every dungeon, every mini dungeon, I was looking at it with a completely new perspective, because Majora's Mask is a game that I haven't played a ton of. And it's definitely not. A lot of people are super fond about this game and like have played it since they were a kid, and like that is very much not the case for me. And initially, I just kind of thought like, oh, those mini dungeons, they're not memorable. They're probably going to be a slog to get through. But honestly, every one has its own little unique hook that I actually ended up appreciating them a lot more than I thought I would. Like, I even put Ancient Castle of Icona above Woodfall Temple. And
I consider that. Yeah.
Icona that's not even a full dungeon, really. You know?
Yeah. I partially wish I had, because, like, I say it in the video, but, like, it is in almost most regards, it's, like, slightly more memorable, even though it has less challenges and, you fight Wizrobe again or whatever, but like, I think the main puzzle hook of it, though it's simple, like I think it's way more interesting than the Woodfall. I guess the main thing there is like lighting the flower, I guess, but just the idea of like you're opening these holes of light, it's just so more thematically stronger, I think.
Well, and there's even some great mirror shield puzzles in there.
Yeah, I do agree with that, and I'm kind of, we're starting to push. I'm not a big mirror shield fan usually, typically, but like I feel like so far, or like the light puzzles, like I felt like it was novel in A Link to the Past, and then this had that same kind of charm where it was like, it was basically the same puzzle,
Yep.
But like, actually, this also has the stuff I'm less fond of. Like, I'm not really into like, there's those later rooms in like Stone Tower where you shine the light on one mirror and charge it up or somehow, and you run to the next one. I really don't like those. Maybe mostly just because the shield aiming is kind of finicky. I feel like, but regardless,
I used to dislike those, but I kind of appreciate them now. I do like light puzzles and reflecting and stuff, because it makes you consider. I just like puzzles that make you consider your surroundings and stuff, and how what you're doing is going to interact with your surroundings. And I feel like that's a good type of puzzle, and it's obviously it's not always executed the greatest, but it like conceptually I think it's pretty cool.
I feel like they'll make slightly more sense to me in Wind Waker, where it's just like like bouncing off each other and like reflecting, whereas in this, like, I sort of really like that, like, you have to charge up the one mirror for something, like, you charge up the mirror, it's some kind of magical mirror, I guess.
And then it stores it and then shoots it out, and then you gotta absorb it back up to charge another mirror or something.
It's a little frustrating sometimes, but yeah, whatever. But yeah, I kind of, it was really cool, and I think even though it's simple, like, Pirate's Fortress was pretty cool, because it was sort of like, it was like the Gerudo hideout in Ocarina of Time, but they kind of advanced it a little bit, so it was like a cool spin on that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, good stuff. And then, I mean, so then back with the main dungeons, I liked both Snowhead and Great Bay, obviously, but I'm looking, I mean, it looks like the most noteworthy thing for your list is that Stone Tower Temple has taken number 1.
Yeah. I didn't think it was gonna happen. Even in that last season finale, I was like, I don't think they're gonna be cracking my top 5, and here we are.
And we got 2.
Two of the 4 dungeons are in my top 5.
Well, okay, so not even talking about Stone Tower. We'll talk about both of them real quick. What was it? Were you just like surprised by both of them? Or?
Yeah. Well, I knew I liked both of them, but I don't remember liking them as much, and I think it's just, that's part of what I love about this series that we're doing, is that like it really, when you really put the dungeon under a magnifying lens, especially with something like Great Bay, just seeing the mechanics of how the whole dungeon works and specifically the paths that you have to follow, I just really love when it feels like the dungeon's taking you on a ride, but not.
It's literally pulling you.
Well, yeah, but not in a way where like you're being railroaded, you know? Because that can be kind of frustrating if it's like completely linear, no variation. You're just going and going and going. That can be frustrating.
Yeah.
And both of these, Stone Tower and Great Bay, they don't like. Again, there's some variation you can explore when you want to, but the critical path forward, for the most part, is pretty much step 1, then step 2, then step 3.
Yeah.
But it feels
they're
really
both good
fun.
at like obfuscating it, or like even making it like making it challenging, even though it is not just because of the individual challenge, but the navigation. Like, I don't know how many people I know hate Great Bay Temple because they get so confused and lost in it, but it's like it's just really not actually that bad. But to me that's more. I know for some people it's just like, well, they'll never like it, but like to me it's actually a testament to that dungeon that it can make itself so confusing to people, even though it's very linear for the most part.
I think that's another case of like if you were to lay it out like on paper or something, what you have to do, it's not that complicated. But I think just especially, you know, being in that central room in that water spinning around, it's really disorienting, and I feel like I feel like people can kind of feel like it's a lot to handle when it's really it just looks like it's a lot to handle, you know.
Yep. And you throw in the fairies, and that makes it a little more like, do I need to get this or not? Which I thought was great. I love the fairies. I don't know if you collected all of those.
I think only one dungeon I didn't get all the fairies. I think Snowhead was the only one I didn't get all the fairies in.
I didn't really consider in the ranking like weighing the reward for any of them, but you know, some of them, like the Stone Tower one, I really never get. I did get it this time because I kind of wanted to be completionist for this time around and see if any of the fairies really affected my overall opinion. But the rewards, I don't even care. Yeah, but it's cool. It's great they give you those rewards. Yeah, obviously.
Well, so and going back to Stone Tower, like I think it is sitting right at my number 1. I thought Ganon's Tower was going to have that spot for a long time, but Stone Tower, really, I think it would be easier to honestly, like, it has everything that I want in a dungeon. It would be, and
it's sort of a final dungeon too.
Yeah, it would be more difficult for me to list everything that I love about it than the reverse, you know, because I think so much. The progression's fantastic. I love the atmosphere and the aesthetic. I love a lot of the puzzles. I love the progression of the dungeon. The mini bosses are some of the best in the series.
There's 2 like full blown mini bosses.
2 super unique and just.
And there's Wizrobe, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah,
well. We don't talk about him that much here.
I don't want to talk about Wizrobe. I'm not a big Wizrobe guy.
No, this is anti-Wizrobe podcast.
Going off of that, like Stone Tower in itself already has everything that I'm looking for in a dungeon. Basically every aspect of it, I think, is great. And something that I have heard pretty frequently in regards to the stray fairies is that Stone Tower Temple is a huge pain to get all of the stray fairies in, and I actually don't agree at all. That actually facilitated a lot of my enjoyment of this dungeon, because basically something I noticed, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think most, if not all, of the stray fairies in Stone Tower are in chests.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's right. Yeah.
And I love that because it takes away a little bit of the guesswork of like putting on the mask. Okay, there's a fairy somewhere in this room. I just need to check every nook and cranny.
Right. it's a little random in like some of the other dungeons where it's like, oh, it was like in this enemy or something, you know?
Yeah, exactly. But in this, you know, once you get the map and compass, and once you piece that together, that those are rewards in some of these chests that you need to do an extra puzzle to get to. It's like, oh, okay, let me just check my map. These are 3 chests that I haven't been able to get to yet. All right, let me revisit those later to get the rest of the stray fairies. And really, it's like, with that in mind, you kind of go through your first pass of the dungeon, get as many stray fairies as you can, and then that's when you need to exit the dungeon, go outside and flip it. Which, by the way, that's an insane mechanic. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Every time I've played,
it is very cool.
Every time I've played this dungeon, that has not lost any of its luster. I think that's
and again, the beauty of it is, again, you only have to do it the one time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like the water temple. Like, even it's really unlikely that you would miss something because it's so linear for the most part.
Yep.
Though I could see, like, if you miss like the boss key, going like, oh, maybe I gotta like flip the dungeon and explore, and you do that. But I feel like it's less likely to have something like the water temple where you're like, oh, I missed this, and now I gotta like go here to move things around. No, it's like, I think it's way more straightforward.
Yep. It facilitates your path through the dungeon in a very challenging but streamlined way, so that you're not likely to miss something like that. You don't have to go super far out of your way to get some obscure key that's off in a corner or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
I agree. I mean, I didn't have it as high as you, but I still have it obviously very high.
Mm-hmm.
I have it in the same realm of other dungeons I've only basically praised. So, I'm with you for sure.
Yeah. But
the
fairies, that's what so you do the first pass, then you go out and you flip the dungeon, you do your second pass, and then at that point, I was already collecting the stray fairies, and I wasn't sure if I was going to get all of them. But I was at a point where I was like, okay, I have like half of them, so I might as well just actually try and hunt the rest down. So I go through my second pass, and I realize there are 3 chests, and I'm like, okay, I just have to go back outside and flip the dungeon again so that I can access those 3. And I don't know, that just felt really clever to me.
Was that what put it over the top for you?
I mean, I probably would have put it very high, but
okay.
That definitely, I just felt it was really, really clever, because a lot of times there are chests or something where you need to do a lot, or it's out of the way, and you get to the chest and then it's like 20 rupees, and it's like, oh, that's kind of lame. But because this was, these are collectibles that are part of, the stray fairy collections, and you get a solid reward at the end, that definitely did help and make me really want to go out of my way to go back outside, flip the dungeon, and go find those 3 chests. Like, it was really compelling for me to complete, whereas I feel like a lot of people might look at that and be a little put off by the fact that you need to leave the dungeon again and flip it again and then flip it back to go to the boss. I just thought it was really cool.
They actually do. It's kind of convenient the way the dungeon's set up to like backtrack to that location is very easy, And even one of the last chests I think you make really to get up there is one where you flip it, but it's right in that room still, like right at the entrance. Plus you got the Song of Soaring, you can go right to the entrance. So like once you get the last one, it's easy to just go whoop and flip the dungeon and you're good to go.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that I think is really clever, that main mechanic, it's right outside the dungeon, right above the door.
Yeah, that's very convenient. You have to leave, which is kind of annoying, I guess, but makes sense.
Yeah.
I think I had to flip it more than I needed to, because I think I missed one, and that was a little frustrating, but it wasn't so bad. I wasn't that upset about it. I mean, and it has a sort of a Turtle Rock issue that it has to contend with, in being like kind of your last dungeon, even though, it's not the end of the game, you know, but because of that, does kind of a good job because
yeah, exactly. It's like that. I feel like that's kind of interesting because especially, we've talked about how I have kind of like final dungeon bias. And I feel like both of these dungeons, the Turtle Rock and Link's Awakening, and then this dungeon, they're kind of in that spot where it's like you're the last dungeon, but you're not like a traditional final dungeon. So it's kind of like they're taking up the mantle of being that final challenge, but still being their own dungeon. And it seems like from the way that we've ranked these two dungeons, it seems like that spot has paid off for both of them.
It's pretty noble pursuit, right? Because
exactly.
I mean, it seems like your ideal situation, I'd probably agree, is to have just a Ganon's Tower situation where the last dungeon is like the finale of the game. I think we can both agree with that because, well, I mean, I guess we can talk about the moon then, really, because like the moon is really cool, but it's not, actually, I don't know if I'd fully agree with that. I actually like the moon and, for example, the egg ending of both those games. Actually, I think they're perfect capstones to the games.
Yeah.
So maybe I don't think the best situation is always a Ganon's Tower. I think it's just different approaches. I think we're gonna end up having something like the moon lower on our list because it's just inherently, it's not really a dungeon.
Yeah, just because of what it is.
The moon is, I think, just a sick set piece in general.
Yeah, well, that was kind of the point that I was trying to make, is that like I feel like the natural idea would be that, oh, you want like a Ganon's Tower at the end. But I feel like these two examples have shown us that, like, no, you can just have a really sweet, like, last dungeon and then have your own little separate finale thing. And it can work out.
Especially if it's thematically strong, you can do whatever, I think. Yeah. And both the game, I think, for me, those are two of my favorite games as a whole, and their endings are a big part of, why, So, like, if that's why we didn't do the egg before, but like, if we would have done it, I probably would have like thrown it at the bottom, which is totally not
the egg is even
emblematic of like what I think of it, Yeah,
the egg is even less so. See, it's kind of more of like it's just that one puzzle. It's not really puzzle even a dungeon
and a boss.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's so cool though still, because it's like, I mean, just from the story perspective, obviously, of gathering all the instruments, but it's also kind of the accumulation of like the trading sequence in that game, Yeah. And the moon has sort of that thing too, because it has, it has the whole mask thing too, which is optional though. But yeah, I mean, okay, the moon, it's what is there to say about it? I mean, it's a cool setting for one. I think just that moment of the story where you go up there and it's like this vast empty field and the single tree it's so iconic to me. It's so like ingrained in my memory.
It's really bizarre, but fantastic in the best way.
Yeah, and it's where it really, I mean, it kind of really starts hammering home kind of the themes of these games, just because you have all these really cool quotes and stuff.
Oh, God,
These very quotable quotes from all the little child mask salesmen.
Yeah, I love those. Those are some of the best quotes.
Yeah, I've taken a lot of inspiration. I've definitely had some like songs and bands I've done that have used.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Used some of those. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's hard to talk about with talking about the game. Like, do you have any takeaways from the game as a whole? Not just the moon, but like, we talk about the dungeons, but like, there's all these side quests, obviously. Like, was there did you do a lot of that stuff this time around?
I did.
Okay.
I didn't. So actually, this was the first, like I said, I've only played through Majora's Mask a handful of times. And every time I've done it, I've kind of looked at a walkthrough a good amount and made sure that I got all of the masks so that I could get the Fierce Deity mask. And this was actually the first time that I didn't do that, because I was like, I want to try and see how difficult Majora is without the Fierce Deity mask, because that kind of makes it, makes it not even a challenge, because it's so Fierce Demon Mask is so overpowered. But like, this is something, Majora's Mask isn't a game that I'm incredibly fond of, especially in comparison to a lot of other Zelda fans. A lot of people really hold this game in super high regard, and I've always kind of been like, it doesn't connect for me in that way. And I gotta be honest, like, playing through this time, it was really doing it for me a lot more than I thought it would.
Okay, cool. Maybe you just had the time with it or something.
Well, yeah, it was just, I think it was honestly that like, it's kind of the same thing with the original Legend of Zelda. To go off on a little tangent, like, the first time I played that game, I hugged a walkthrough the whole way because it's pretty cryptic, especially for someone who's not used to games like that. So I played through it that way, and I was like, yeah, that was cool. A little too cryptic for me. But then every subsequent playthrough, I would just have more and more knowledge of how it works, where certain secrets were, and I got to a point where I could get through it on my own without help from a walkthrough. And once I got to that point, I started loving it so much. And I feel like it's kind of similar with this, because a lot of those side quests, a lot of the mask quests and stuff like that, I feel like that's really kind of the whole point of the game. But a lot of those are kind of blocked behind very specific time constraints or doing stuff at certain times of day. And I think that might be something that I never fully get over, because it is a little bit like, whoops, if you miss this at this time of day, sorry, you need to reset everything.
Well, I think luckily they kind of made the saving a little bit better.
Yeah.
Like before, in the previous game, you could save, but when you come back, your save was gone, and you had to reset. But now it's like... Yep. Like this last time I played, I messed up like Sakon's hideout a few times. I did too. But, like, it was like, oh, I saved right before, so it's like, okay, at least there's that. I can go back to that. Whereas like before, I guess I never really failed it before, but I guess that's interesting to think about. Like when I was a kid, I had a strategy guide for it, and that's how I first beat it. And like, so like a lot of the issues people always had with it, I just never had. I never really thought about it, because then when I would return to it, it's like, well, I just know the gist. I wouldn't remember everything, but I kind of know the gist of everything.
Yeah, exactly.
And, or at least a lot of the things that like make it way less of not even a hassle to me at all, of just like, I kind of got in a rhythm of like, obviously you slow down time, but like when I get to a dungeon, that's always a great checkpoint to just reset stuff for the most part.
So that you have enough time. Definitely, yeah.
So all these things of like, oh, the time limit stresses me out because I can't explore all this stuff. Like, I just have never had that experience.
That's funny, because that's me. That's completely me.
I like showed myself the whole game as a kid, and I loved it as a kid, even with the guide. And then after that, it's just like smooth sailing. And then now, especially when I got the 3DS version and they had the new Bomber's Notebook and everything, that was like one of the first Zelda games I 100%ed, because I think that even gets rid of a lot of the issues of like specific timing, because it'll kind of tell you, something that really does nudge you along.
That is something that I wanted to know, is that like, this, I think this was only my second time playing through Majora's Mask 3D. I think I only played through it when the game came out. And even then I was, using a walkthrough. And this time I was like, all right, I want to try and do some more of it on my own. There's definitely certain stuff that I know when you need to do it and stuff. And the Bomber's Notebook, the way that they streamlined it and the way that you get hints from the bombers in town, like that definitely goes a long way. Even so, I feel like there are a few where I'm a little bit like, okay, how do I activate this quest? Or like there's a lot where like you just need to be talking to an NPC like wearing a specific mask, and that can kind of be a little bit like trial and error, or like how do I get to the next step? Did I mess something up? Do I need to reset,
that makes sense. That's funny, because like that sort of thing was less of a problem like initially playing it, but now where I do runs of it where I'm like trying to play it fast or something, and I'm not paying attention as much, I'm like, why won't Anju talk to me?
Yeah.
Why won't she talk to me about this? And it's like, oh, I gotta, like, it makes sense. You gotta put on the mask to like signal to her this, but like when I'm just trying to play through it quick and I'm like, what's going on? Like, I'm like, oh yeah.
Well,
think about
that's another specific example that I was kind of like, all right, this is weird, and I ended up having to reset time, like maybe 2 or 3 times, because there's weird flags with, like, first of all, activating the cafe quest. You need to talk to her wearing the mask, but also to get the key to steal the room from the Goron, you need to have not talked to her before she talks to the Goron. Because if you talk to her first, she's like, oh, are you staying here? Oh, sorry, we're all booked up. A Goron is coming this afternoon. And if she tells that to you, then you can't get the key anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah. But at least after you fail it then shows you the time frame.
Yeah,
that you need to talk to her. But I get it. If you're trying to do it and you mess it up, then it's really annoying. But that's kind of a low stakes one, getting the Goron key. Yep. But yeah, for sure, I can see that. But yeah, it is just such a, it's a very, you know, in-depth game from a story. Like I love the, you know, when I see people talk about like the remake making certain things easier with the time, and it's like that takes away from the challenge. Like I don't vibe with that, even though it's like one of my favorite games, because the time thing is like, it's sort of a challenge in that, but what it more so does is facilitate this sort of clockwork world that you're interacting with.
Definitely.
And altering things, or like getting to know people in specific ways.
Yep.
And that's what it's really about. It's not about like, can I talk to this person before 3 p.m.?
Yeah,
you know, it's
absolutely.
It's more about,
it really is just about fleshing out the world, you know, and that's really the strong suit of this game.
Yeah, and so that's how like I feel like a video game can tell you an interesting story, is through its mechanics, and I think that's always been something that this game really I really connected to. But you know, and as a kid, I think I mentioned this a long time ago in something, but like the thing that originally kind of stuck out to me as a kid, it's like it's got some deeper themes, I guess you could say, though not really compared to any other Zelda game, but like it's just more on its surface. Obviously wears it on its sleeve more, but as a kid, it was more because it was like you had all it's just so many of the characters you encounter are like dead or passed away, and it's about kind of helping them move on. And so as a kid, it was like, wow, it's like making me think about death or whatever. But the thing that sticks out to me more now, and I think it's because they really hammer it home on the Moon, is like there's a big theme about like bearing yourself to another person, or like, you know, like
definitely
being you know, ashamed of your true self, or you know, something like that. And there's a lot of, it's not just stories that are about these dead characters and moving on from that, but also, you know, like, you know, revealing yourself fully to another person. And I think I don't know, like that really sticks out to me more than anything. Absolutely. You know,
there are a lot of really, I do feel like thematically this is pretty far and away like the heaviest themed Zelda game, at least in my eyes, because you can take away so much from this. There's a lot about like identity and like presenting yourself to someone, but there's also a lot in there about like being there for people who need it and stuff like that, and supporting others. Like that's kind of the whole through line for Skull Kid, is that like, you know, he was misunderstood, and the mask basically corrupted him and took advantage of his state. But even so, it's like the giants are still his friends, and you're really trying to help this one individual by helping all of these other individuals in the world of Termina. And I think that's really cool.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that was great. Like, it's sort of just like a mini sort of story, but it ends up really coming together with all the little giants. And it's just like, it reminds me of the stories in the past 2 games, where it's just like this sort of light touch of, you know, like there's only these 4 little bits of dialogue, but they kind of convey a lot in those moments, I feel like. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, it's cool. The Skull Kid, and there, and then it also just has so much like, I don't know, like psychedelic elements to it, or whatever, that may just put it over the top for me. Of like, just these characters are also interesting to me, like the Happy Mask Salesman, obviously, and the Skull Kid and the Giants, and yeah, I don't know, it's one I've always really liked as a kid for that reason, and it's kind of stuck with me for sure.
Yeah,
it's just like stayed strong for me.
Definitely. And I've this isn't one of my favorite Zelda games. I think it's a fantastic game and I really love playing it, but especially more so in this playthrough, I'm really appreciating a lot of that stuff more.
And it's interesting, like, okay, even it tying it sort of back into the moon, but more Skull Kid again. I'm thinking about like, it's of this character who is sort of he's like this childish guy hiding behind, or he's like almost been taken advantage of by this like evil power or whatever. But it is interesting, and it makes me think of like this whole idea of like how they revealed in the one book that this was all like made up by the power master him. What's interesting about that element, regardless, is it's this whole world where like everybody is mad at him.
Yeah.
No, and really, though. So if it is in his mind, that works kind of well too. But it sort of makes me think of like a feeling that I have all the time, where it's like, I hope nobody's mad at me.
Yeah,
definitely. And I thought that was a really I don't know, it's kind of funny to me, but
well, yeah, you can get like super deep into the psyche of Skull Kid, in this game, because it really is a thing of like, even before he had the mask, he's really mischievous and like does clearly like he did stuff to upset the Giants. So he's the kind of guy who like, he just wants to be loved. He just wants to have friends, and like that, but like he just goes too far sometimes with like pranks or being a jerk and stuff like that. And it's like, with that thing where it's all in his mind or whatever, like I actually feel like that's a really cool way to look at it, because throughout the whole game you're doing these side quests, you're helping all these other people. And something that I think people could find frustrating, I don't know how many people do, is that, you can't do all of these side quests in one cycle. So hypothetically, you're helping these people, and then you're resetting all the work you've done and putting them right back into their troubles. What. But if you look at this as like, this is all about Skull Kid, and it's about helping Skull Kid, basically helping all these people out, it's like practice for the one real person that really matters, that's like really in distress, and that's Skull Kid.
And like each individual story kind of carries with it its own, like, it's not really about whether it was time was reset or not, or what the status of things. I mean, that's just true of a lot of things, really. Like, it doesn't really invalidate it, It's more about the emotions conveyed in those moments.
Similar to like the Link's Awakening themes. Like, just because it might not physically be real doesn't mean it wasn't real to you.
Right. Yeah. That's a similar thing, where by the end of it, to me, the takeaway from that game is less about whether or not you're destroying this whole world, or are you evil or not. Like, that's not even really, for me at least, like that's sort of a fun thing in the game, but there's so much more, I think, that you can draw on it from just the surface level, which is kind of what I was saying too about like, this game is like, I think when you first think about it, you just think about all the corpses you collect and stuff, but there's way more to it than just like wow, there's all these dead guys, you help move on to the other life or whatever, you know? But of course, yeah, the moon is really cool. The scene before it is also really cool, I guess you should say, but just that setting is cool. And it's not really a mini dungeon, but it is more than the egg, which is just one puzzle. This is more of like a series of 4 challenges. That, you know, some of them are better than others. I think I like it just conceptually. I love the concept of, like, if you've done all the work, you can turn all the masks to get in this ridiculous power. And it's even optional, you know what I mean?
That is cool. And I do something that is interesting though, is that, like, even though this isn't the final dungeon, it does that final dungeon thing where each of the challenges is like almost based on one of the other dungeons, or like one.
Oh, of course, yeah.
You know, one of them is you need to be Deku Link. One of them you need to be Goron Link. One of them you need to be Zora Link. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, they're short enough that Deku Link 1 is fine, I guess, right? Like, do you have any strong feelings about that?
I don't think that's definitely not one of my favorites. I'm partial to the Goron one and the Zora one.
Really? Those are my least favorite.
Oh, wow. I love rolling. The Goron one is so infamous, but I think it's so much fun when you get it right.
When you get it right, it's pretty satisfying. I did it the marathon on my second try, so I'll brag about that. But the first time I played it for playing just through the series, I struggled a lot. I just feel like it's such precision timing that I feel like a good final thing should challenge you on something you've been like previously challenged on, but harder. And I feel like I've never had to do anything like this, you know?
Yeah. Well, I feel like there is a decent amount of that in like Snowhead and in that region.
It's more of like, though, like jump over one gap,
that's true.
You know, or roll around the side of this. This was like, you have to be precise and you have to hit these chests in a specific way. And I don't know. It just, I mean, I don't hate it, but I kind of hate it. And then the Zora one, like the thing that I kind of don't like about it is that like just having to jump out of the water.
Yeah, that can because be a pain. I missed it
especially
a few
because
times
like
this time.
They really I mean, we're not going to get into the changes so much, but we're talking about the 3D version, but they're different. This is different and you know, whatever. The changes, there's a lot of changes in the game, but this game kind of took away like really the motivation to always be swimming fast as a Zora. And it took away the only puzzle where you would need to have jumped out of the water as a Zora. So like all of a sudden now it's like, yeah, and you like, did you know you can jump out of the water?
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Where it's like, yeah, I just feel like maybe if that was I feel like the Zora swimming, they could have incorporated more things with that in the game to make it a little more fun.
Sure.
Because like, I feel like the nerfing they did to it actually made certain areas more playable because like I like being able to swim slow in certain areas.
Well, even in that challenge, it was kind of like for a while I didn't realize that like you needed to get to the gate before it drops again. So I was kind of just like, okay, let me just take my time going down these corridors now, so I make sure I don't like bump into the wall or anything.
Right. I especially like in Pirate's Fortress and Great Bay was like, I'm just gonna swim slow because there's stuff I don't want to bump into. But I feel like, but then I feel like there should still have been stuff. They should have done it better, but there should have been a lot more like jumping because that was awesome as a kid, just being in Great Bay, like the Cape by the ocean or whatever, and just like flipping out of the water and flying around. It reminds me a little bit of having Epona and Ocarina of Time, and just like as a kid, just stomping around everywhere. But there's really not much you can actually do, you know. But anyway, so those I'm less fond of, but conceptually I like it. But I really like the last one because again, maybe it's challenging me on something I they don't really give to you in the game or like challenge you on, but like I did like doing the bomb chew stuff and then
bomb chews
fighting
are horribly underutilized in these games. They're so much fun.
Yeah, it's strange they even created them at all. Like I wonder what they were thinking. As an extra
random bonus thing, like it's pretty much relegated to like a mini game and a couple puzzles in Ocarina of Time.
Yeah. I guess, and they're fun. I think I like the bomb chew mini games in both Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, and I liked these like little bombing puzzles are fun. But yeah, I don't know. I liked that one a lot more, maybe just because I'm partial to that. But yeah, it's just a cool setting overall. But it's really, to me, it could have just been, here's the moon and the boss fight and that's it, and that would have been cool. But I like this optional nature of like you can go there and you can even go further and get a collectible heart piece as well. But like you could get this other mask that kind of rewards you and it gives you a little bit of extra challenge. So even if like the Goron rolling was like the worst thing in the world, like it's not really, that wouldn't take away too much from it for me, if that makes sense. It pays off in the boss fight. So this, you said when you fought Majora, this was your first time without the mask.
Yeah, without the Fierce Deity mask, yeah.
Or at least you didn't use it. So I mean, okay, what do you think about this fight?
I think it's the coolest thing is just the atmosphere and just it's so bizarre. Like you just going up and talking to that just from that first conversation with the little Happy Mask salesman mask kid, like, oh, do you want to play with me? And then you just get warped into this weird, surreal, crazy colors. Like, it's nuts. It's really nuts.
Yeah.
It
really does feel like you're in the belly of the beast. Yeah. You go on the moon, and then now you're even further. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was kind of hoping that like this was something I didn't really notice before. I was kind of hoping for I don't know. I was a little disappointed by like the musical theme, or like I guess the lack of musical theme.
Okay.
There's not really a ton going. Isn't it like?
I think it's the final hours theme.
Yeah, I think I kind of wanted some sort of like really unique, weird, intense battle theme. Something. You do get something quirky when it's Majora's Incarnation, but
yeah, true. Yeah, okay. So the theme was disappointing, but you did like the setting overall.
Yeah, the setting was fantastic, and I didn't have too much trouble. Like I didn't die or anything. And I also had the foresight to get a bottle of Chateau Romani, so I wasn't running out of magic or anything.
See, I hadn't done that all the time, like always as a kid, but obviously I should have done it. But
that was something I remembered from my previous playthrough, and that easily helped. And I'm sure that definitely made it a lot easier because I only really had to go and hit the jars on the sides when I was out of arrows. But I do think the fight is pretty cool. I like. I don't know. I like shooting all the masks. I like them. It's a really creepy move when like you're still just fighting Majora's Mask and like all the tendrils go out and it shoots a laser at you.
Yeah,
like, that's bizarre. Yeah, the whole thing is bizarre. And then Majora's Wrath has the whips, and it's a very. I think Majora is a very imposing boss, and like aesthetically, everything about this fight is really cool.
It's kind of dynamic. There's just like a lot going on in the different phases, and I think for a newer player, it's definitely challenging. I still think it could even still be challenging, but there's, like I said, where you mentioned with Chateau Romani, and then obviously the Fierce Deities mask. If you get that, there's things to negate that, or if you don't have the Gilded Sword or whatever, but. That's kind of what I think is sort of cool about it, actually, is there's a lot of different factors that could go into the fight. It's not like there's criticism of certain Zelda bosses where they get kind of cookie cuttery, and I think this overall has that element of like classic, like A Link to the Past almost, where like there's a few different things you can even do, like different things work. You could hit them with you could use the mirror shield or the light arrows or the Zora flippers work in this case here. And so it's not just about like, utilize the one strategy. Yep. It's, you can kind of, figure out what works. There's stuff I've always done because it's like what I figured out. And then over time realized, oh, this is a better strategy. So I'll do that.
I do love bosses like that.
Yeah. And then, just the evolution over the phases is really cool. Like it starts off as just, like you said, the tendrils come out of the mask and it's shooting at you. And it's like, oh, okay. This is like, we've only just seen it come to life, but then it totally throws you for a loop in the second phase when it starts like breakdancing and stuff.
That's so bizarre.
Yeah. I like it. I like how it embodies all these different things. And there's sort of a mystery to, the concept of Majora that I really like. But then, that final phase is really cool. Like, throwing the whips at you and stuff like that. And I think it can be pretty...
Majora can get you from like wicked far away with those whips. So it's like you're never really safe once you're in that phase. You need to constantly be on your toes.
Yeah, I think this is one of my favorite final bosses, honestly. I don't know. It feels to me like as dynamic as I feel when I'm fighting Ganon in A Link to the Past, where it's like the fight just changes so much. And I guess in like Link's Awakening, it inherently changes between like 7 different sort of mini bosses almost. But this to me feels like Majora feels like Ganon to me, like just like a dude that I'm fighting who is like getting, crazy more intense as things go on.
Definitely.
But but it's not, I mean, I don't even know. What can you say about the moon, like as a dungeon? Like I don't really feel like, I didn't feel like it was totally fair to put it on the list, but I figured, I just didn't want to end it on Stone Tower.
I think it's fair. We've already set the standard right when we started doing mini dungeons, because I do feel similar about this to a lot of the mini dungeons in the series, where it's like I'm inherently probably going to put a lot of them low because I don't look at them as like full dungeons, but they definitely share enough in common where, it's not like comparing apples and oranges. It's like comparing apples and crab apples. Like,
okay. Yeah. I sort of view it as like comparing oranges and like, what are those little guys?
Like
the cuties.
Yeah, the cuties.
Yeah, like
clementines.
They all kind of serve a different purpose, I feel like, Like I do think, like especially this game, for example, I do think the mini dungeons kind of like fill out the world in a really cool way, and they like, I just like absolutely. A different type of challenge. I don't like doing the same thing all the time, and so like sometimes if the lead up to a dungeon is a mini dungeon, it's like, okay, to me that's always like, that's unique. Well,
I think obviously these mini dungeons in this game, I feel like all of them, like if you look at my list, I put all of them above all of the mini dungeons in Ocarina of Time, because I think each one in this game just took such a more unique approach to like what it is, because each one really has its own. Like even Pirate's Fortress, you get like a really cool little cutscene where like you're sneaking into the vents and looking at like what their plan is going to be, and then you shoot the bees down on them. Like that's really unique and memorable.
Yeah, that is cool. Yeah, I pretty much agree with that too. Like they just feel like they feel like a real part of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas like, I mean the dungeons all have like a very specific story thing they're tied to, but they feel a bit more like unknowable. You know what I mean? They're meant to kind of be. They remind me of some of the dungeons in A Link to the Past, or like the temples in Ocarina of Time, where they're kind of mysterious.
Yeah.
But then like Pirate's Fortress and Icona, it's like we know like they're just real places where you're visiting. Yep. And so it makes sense too that they don't have a full dungeon kind of structure, but they got items.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I mean, where did you end up putting the moon?
So I put it as the lowest of the mini dungeons in Majora's Mask. I put it at the 46th spot. But even like I just said, that's above all of the mini dungeons from Ocarina of Time. And that's actually also from quite a few dungeons in Zelda 1 and Zelda 2. Like, I do think just because it's all optional and you can only do all of it if you have all the masks, and it's just go do this challenge, not really a lot of connective tissue. I think that's kind of what puts it in that lower section for me. That's just kind of how I feel about a lot of mini dungeons in general. But I do think there are a lot of strong suits, like the visuals of it, the aesthetic, the design. I do think the challenges themselves are pretty fun. Like we said, I love the quotes and all the implications and stuff behind them. So a lot of that is what kind of boosted the coolness factor of the moon for me. And that's why I ended up kind of putting it above that big chunk at the bottom.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. I have it even lower. I have it just below the moon.
Yeah, the other moon.
From Zelda 2. Partially because I was like, that's fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, mainly if I was, again, ranking it as like a thing in a Zelda game, just more abstractly, it would be in like one of the top areas. Yeah. It's one of my favorite moments in a game. But yeah, it's just, to me, what's the coolest thing about it is not even any of the optional challenge stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though that's cool that it's optional and stuff.
That's why I'm always conflicted on this list, is because like when it comes to something like the moon, I'm like, all right, do I rank it based on like how much I like it, or do I rank it specifically as a dungeon, how well I think it does as a dungeon, or do I just rank it based on whether or not I like playing it, or I would want to come back and play it again?
That's fair.
And it's always always a mix of all of them, and I always have different justifications for where I put something, but
that can carry weight too, and like that can boost the thing for me too. But yeah, I'm careful not to, like, I don't want to like open up the floodgates, because then what's to stop us from having like the beaver race on here?
Yeah.
Well, it's not technically a dungeon, but it's a lot of fun.
Similar aspects. Yeah.
But yeah. Oh, overall, it's a great game. I think even if it's not one of your favorites, there's a lot to like about it. For me, well, you know what? We got to bring up our other metrics. Actually, I want to talk about these other stats real quick. So we got our classic average dungeon score that we introduced, I think, in the last season. And, again, we're excluding mini dungeons from here. This is where we're boiling it down strictly to dungeons. But what's interesting about it is, you can see here, we're both kind of in agreement that, like, overall, I think this game has some of the best dungeons just individually, not like as a whole group, but like these are some of the coolest dungeons.
You had the numbers don't lie. I would have, if you had asked me, do I think Majora's Mask has better dungeons than Ocarina of Time, I probably would have told you no, but here we are.
And the reason I first did it this way was because in the previous seasons or whatever, there was, I didn't want to do it by just like giving saying this game has better dungeons because it has a few more. So I said, let's do an average. But I thought that reflects really well now on Majora's Mask, which that's totally cool to see. And I stand by that. And for me, that's a metric I would go by, saying this game has great dungeons. But I thought, let's try the other way. Let's just assign raw points to these dungeons and see where these stack up. And looking at that scoring that we gave, it shows that it's, if you want to look at it that way, it's like there's there's less dungeons, so it's kind of like hurt by that. I don't know if either of these, I mean, both, you can kind of interpret both of these how you want, but I mean, what do you draw from this? Does the amount of dungeons affect this for you?
Yes, absolutely. And that was kind of my concern. What we were talking about before is that, like, if I were to say what game has my favorite dungeons, I wouldn't say Majora's Mask, because honestly, to me, it is kind of a pretty big detriment that there are only 4 main dungeons, because I want more. And I just feel like it's really interesting looking at these two different metrics, because it's like, you can say for the big one, where it's all cumulative and we both have A Link to the Past at the top, you could look at that and say, well, yeah, obviously, because it has the most dungeons, so it's going to rack up the most points. That's almost a little bit unfair. But on the flip side, that's like the same reason why in the other one, in the regular averages, A Link to the Past for me is like in 4th. Because while I do feel it has a few, like, if there were only 4 dungeons in A Link to the Past and they happen to be the really good ones, then it would be really high up for the averages. And I do feel like the amount of dungeons, I personally factor that in. So I just think it's interesting to see it both ways. But it's also not like a given, because take like Link's Awakening and Legend of Zelda. Those have the same amount of dungeons, but on your cumulative, you have Link's Awakening in 2nd place and Legend of Zelda in 2nd to last. So it's still interesting to see how these lists place emphasis on how consistent the dungeons are, I guess. And it's almost like the big one, the big list, that's like the dungeon power of the game or something. And like the average, that's more like how consistent they are, how consistent they can be, and how smart they can be with their designs, I guess. Yeah.
We need to come up with a third metric that like measures progression or something, where it's like if the second one we ranked higher than the first dungeon of the game, it's like worth more points or something. Because that to me would show like consistency more than anything. Like Majora's Mask for you would have this, where each dungeon you have ranked higher than the last one. But like, like I don't know. I don't even know what I'm trying to come up with.
Yeah, we can make like a little like Triforce of dungeon averages. We have like the dungeon power, the dungeon wisdom, and the dungeon courage of the games.
Oh, okay. So someone's we got to figure out the math on that. But I don't know. Overall, I think it's, it's an interesting, to me, this game and Link's Awakening, they're like some of my favorite games, and maybe my favorites, and they've stuck with me for so long. But they don't fully convey like like I feel like we have kind of a lineage of Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time that are a bit more comparable. And then I feel like those games, even though they share spin-off aspects and similarities, they're kind of like in their own separate cases, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I feel like when I think of like the dungeon progression and like the way, I don't know, just kind of the structures of those games, I view them as like very more similar.
Yeah.
So it's very weird that we're the Zelda series is starting to take some twists and turns, as we're seeing.
For sure.
Yeah. Any final thoughts you have on this game at all? Or
I definitely appreciated it on this playthrough, probably more so than I ever have playing through this game. And it was really cool, and it's just, even doing this list, like, it's enlightening to myself how much I really do enjoy these dungeons, because if you just go back to the other season finale, like, I was singing a very different tune, so I guess I'm eating some crow, but like I don't mind.
Well, yeah, and I guess this is more for, but with our main list, but also these little like dungeon power and averages. You know, the reason we show both of them and they're like in different orders is to say that like all this like ranking and like data and all that it's only really can do so much, and really what is, you know, what we're here to do is to talk about them and what we like or dislike or whatever about them. I don't know, that just stuck out to me looking at, you know, like particularly where Majora's Mask is on those two lists. Like, it stuck out to me as like, well, which one's the better reflection of my opinion? It's like you just kind of get a vibe from whatever we're saying, and you can determine which has better dungeons.
Yeah, it depends on the player too. So, you know, different players place heavier emphasis on different things. So some people might be like, Majora's Mask only has 4 dungeons, but if you think they're all top tier, then that might not matter to you. You might think this game has amazing dungeons, whereas you might,
especially this game has such strong opinions.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Well, I mean, okay, we've done it. We've gotten to the end of Majora's Mask, which was a fun trip. You know, fun little breakaway, I guess, from Ocarina of Time. But now we got sort of the next 2 seasons are sort of connected. They're going to be separate, but like obviously they're kind of often considered a piece. We're going to the Oracle games, which I'm pretty excited about because, you know, I love the Link's Awakening style gameplay, and this obviously expands that in a way that I'm hoping, you know, is similar to Majora's Mask. We're gonna do Oracle of Seasons for the next season. Any early predictions? I know you don't really love this game.
I mean, I love all Zelda games to an extent. Oracle of Seasons is a very weird one for me. I'm sure we'll get into that next season finale, but I think there are maybe a handful that I will like. I don't think these. I know I said this last time, but I really don't think any of these are gonna crack the top 5.
Okay. That seems reasonable. I don't think so either, but only because I feel like right now my top 5 are like if someone told me these are the top 5 best dungeons in the series, I'd be like, okay. And yeah, so there's like 1 or 2 in Oracle of Seasons that I think are like awesome, but I like all of them, I think, for the most part. Like I mentioned the Link's Awakening dungeons earlier. I'm excited to go back into just like, all right, I got these keys, and I got okay, there's this locked door. Where am I gonna spend my key? I like the key economy. So what I expect is to kind of be having games filling up my top 10 to 20 area, you know, and then some like bursting higher. That's my prediction, but like you were with Majora's Mask, we'll see how surprised I am.
Yeah, we'll have to see, because I don't think I've ever really looked at Seasons with this kind of lens, and I actually haven't played Seasons in a couple of years. The most recent one I played was Ages, and something that I kind of took note of, and I was playing through it very fast because that was supposed to be practice for the marathon, and I ended up not doing it at the marathon. But while I was doing that, a thought that occurred to me is that I feel like a lot of these dungeons are they're similar to Majora's Mask. They're taking swings, but I'm not sure they land quite as much in these games for me.
Okay. Well, certainly Ages is a lot more ambitious, I think.
True.
But I think Seasons has a certain run of dungeons that they have a unique gimmick and like setting to them, but they're not like it feels like they didn't overexert themselves. Okay. So I think it might have a good sweet spot. But Ages, I think I like the big swings in Ages, but we'll see how they pay off, I guess.
We'll see.
But Seasons is its own season. So we're gonna we're gonna, you know, play the first whatever dungeons, and then we'll have a wrap up. Maybe it'll be more like, well, there is a final area there. It'll probably be more like Turtle Rock, where it's like lopped in. But I guess we'll see. I won't know until I play it, you know, and be like, okay, this is what it's like. So, just bear with us. It will be. I'll have figured it out, I think, by the second to last dungeon video, so you'll know it by then. Anyway, Corey, thanks again for joining me. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. It's always a blast being on Gooey's Dungeon Dive.
Hell yeah. Well, all right. Thanks to everybody for listening, and we will see you in the Oracle games.